Hi, good morning. How are you? Nice to see you, Julia.
It's such a pleasure.
Welcome to this second day of our Boredom conference. We are gonna start right now after the success of the first day yesterday. I'm pleasure to see many of you, of my friends here for this philosophy and miscellaneous panel, which is going to start with the presentation of my very good friend, Julia Köwitz García. She is an undergraduate student, the only one in the conference, at the Complutense University of Madrid, here in Spain. And her presentation is entitled From Chronicle Situational Boredom to Deep Boredom. So, Julia, the floor is yours. Whenever you want, you can start.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor for me to be in this conference. I will be sharing a summary of my upcoming research. I hope you enjoy listening. Of course, I'm open to questions when I finish sharing, and I will be sharing now my PowerPoint. Uh,
Julia, you are unmute. You are mute right now. So please unmute yourself.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I was talking up. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This article analyzes boredom in the work of the playwright, writer, and revolutionary Georg Büchner on the basis of Josefa Ros Velasco's research. First, the arguments linking the social, cultural, and political circumstances of 19th century Germany with chronified situational boredom and deep boredom will be developed. In fact, an inevitable consequence follows from this analysis: the evolution of a chronified situational boredom towards a deep boredom, as Ros Velasco refers to in her theoretical framework on boredom. The first thesis of the article consists precisely in assuming this transition as an essential characteristic of the period. This transition, whose imprint is demonstrable in both the socio-political and cultural spheres of Germany at the time. The implications of the passage from a chronified situational boredom to one of a profound type will be numerous and of an unprecedented relevance. A world without God will have to face the uncomfortable abyss of nothingness in which boredom will become the main protagonist and threat to the human being. Moreover, this connection will serve Büchner as a starting point to criticize the current social system of the Germany of the Restoration, still immersed in absolutism. The analysis of Leonce and Leonce and Lena will be of particular relevance in shedding light on this issue. Directly related to this idea is the second thesis of the article, which consists of Büchner's specific use of boredom. The double reactive capacity of boredom will then become a fundamental property in his work as a whole. As a first fundamental premise, Ros Velasco refers that boredom is a symptom, a sign of discontentment and contempt for what is in front of us. Above all, boredom corresponds to a call for attention with respect to the reality in which we find ourselves immersed. It is a symptom insofar as it is only the one that makes us react. It cannot be held responsible for the reaction itself. Boredom is not the source neither of light nor of darkness. The intensity and frequency of boredom varies according to exogenous or endogenous factors, and as such can be caused by environmental conditions. The environment does not provide sufficient stimulus, or on the contrary provides it in excess, as well as by attentional conditions. The subject experiencing it simply cannot pay attention, or functional conditions. With respect to the cost, the perceived benefit is too low. Its status as a symptom is important because it shows that, in stricto sensu, boredom is not a disease. However, it becomes a disease when the symptom that it is becomes chronic over time. The characteristics of the definition of boredom are followed by a typology that is fundamental for the present study, and in the boredom disease, Ros Velasco distinguishes four fundamental categories. The so-called simple boredom, known as state boredom or situation-dependent boredom in the field of psychology and psychiatry, is the most common and less pathological of all. It includes those cases in which an individual or a group is bored in a specific situation, but their boredom fades when the context changes. Chronic boredom, however, does not disappear when the context changes, as it comes from oneself. The reasons underlying this type of boredom are, for this very reason, of a psychic or neurological nature. Particularly relevant for the present study are chronified situational boredom and deep boredom, as well as the transition from one to the other. The first one contemplates the assumption by which an individual or a group is bored because of an unchanging context to which he or she cannot do anything, even if he or she would like to react to it. The impossibility to react lies precisely in the environment itself. If this boredom or the chronic type becomes chronic over time due to the impossibility of introducing changes in the environment, we then witness a deep boredom, which is ultimately the most pathological boredom of all. The individual or group suffering from deep boredom feels a tiredness and a weariness in the face of life that is truly difficult to appease. I would like to point out the following. In the table, it only appears as a source of deep boredom, a specific context which is invariant over time, as the article focuses on the transition from a chronic situational boredom to deep boredom. However, it should not be forgotten the fact that chronic boredom can also lead to deep boredom. Simple or passing boredom is healthy since it helps us to determine what we want to leave behind and makes us react. In its healthy aspect, boredom has a double reactive component since, on the one hand, we attend to the reactive moment of becoming aware of the situation to then give way to a reactive one that implies some kind of act to change it. That is why, when the transition from the first to the second plane is most natural or simple in cases of state boredom, this transition is in pathological forms of boredom in principle forbidden. Only if there is an extreme reaction on behalf of the subject or the collective experiencing the boredom, it is possible to move to action. This fact has significant implications as far as the present study is concerned, since it focuses on the cases of chronified situational boredom and deep boredom, as said before. The unfeasibility of the subject experiencing deep boredom to move to the second reactive level has its counterpart in the cosmos of literature and philosophy by means of a vindication of the ideal versus the real in the Lustspiel Leonce und Lena. Based on the theoretical framework of Josefa Ros Velasco's boredom studies, the presence and importance of boredom in the following plays by Georg Büchner would be analyzed: Leonce, Leonce und Lena, and Woyzeck. The selection of these works stems from their alignment with the object of study. They present signs and indications of the transition from a chronified situational boredom to one of a profound type. The aforementioned transformation is explained in advance as a symptom and characteristic sign of the period on the basis of a comprehensive analysis of the social, cultural, and political circumstances of Restoration Germany. If there is something particularly interesting about the Germany of the Romantics, it is that it could not imagine a fall of the world. Neither the advances in the realm of empirical sciences nor pre-modern minds could give way to the abandonment of metaphysics. Although this new phase was already in its process of realization, the ancient vestige of mystery and the fantastic were still floating in the air. Symptoms of such a motley cosmos were, precisely, the chronified situational boredom and its corresponding evolution towards a deep boredom. This kind of generalized boredom was linked to a worldview in which the fantastic continued to have a place, even though the existence of boredom was often attributed to the birth of modernity and cities. Even being the product of modernity, it was a boredom that could still lead the individual suffering from it to a kind of nothingness or immoral madness in which the sublime of the fantastic was confused with the horrible of the new order. Even if this property attributable to deep boredom only lasted as long as a fleeting flash in the sky, it undoubtedly imprinted a certain sublimating character that we find very often in the works of the Romantics. It sought duration, the fact that it was born and died in infinity gives this deep boredom of the Romantics the demonic character with which Zweig describes Hölderlin, Kleist and Nietzsche in the struggle with the demon. All three, torn from their own being by a most powerful and in a certain sense otherworldly force, are thrown into a calamitous whirlwind of passion. All three pass through the world like a vast and luminous meteor, alien to their time, misunderstood by their generation, and then plunge into the mysterious night of their mission. They do not know where they are going. They leave the infinite to sink again in the infinite, and as they pass, they barely touch the material world. A power superior to their own will dominates in them, a non-human power in which they feel imprisoned. The man who suffers from deep boredom ignores, like these three demoniacs, where he is actually going. Like them, he is dominated by a power of his own will, a non-human power in which he feels imprisoned. And it does not matter if man is freed from the thread of nature by means of technology. Metaphysics never dies, and proof of this is this substratum that manifests itself in the most diverse forms throughout history and time. If the human being suffers in this era from a generalized chronified situational boredom and often becomes deep boredom, it is only as a manifestation of this non-human power in which they feel imprisoned. Feuerbach's divinized man must bear the burden of the divine projection he has made of himself. In the distance between the human and the divine lies precisely the emptiness that generates boredom. Man has traveled in the opposite direction, this path from God to man, turning it into a path from man to the divine. And this inversion in the man-God projection has brought nothing but the tempest of that dreaded emptiness, which, in its most extreme manifestation, becomes profound boredom. If the human being had not projected his best forces in an image of God, neither would he have made of them a power that dominates him. Thus, in the following fragment, we witness Len's deep despair. In the meantime, his situation was becoming more and more desperate. All that serenity by Oberlin and all that peacefulness of the valley had disappeared. The world he had wanted to take advantage of had a huge crack in it. He felt no hatred, no love, no hope. It was filled with a tremendous emptiness and a restlessness that tormented him. As already mentioned, Ros Velasco distinguishes two different origins for deep boredom, chronic boredom and chronified situational boredom. Len's case is that of a deep boredom derived from a situational boredom chronified in time, since he has no way to free himself from the reverberation of the terrible will of destiny, which, in the process of work, drags everything along with it, regardless of the result or the product obtained. In fact, everything has to be aligned with the labor process itself, consumption, capital investment, productive destruction, and so on. This monstrous wheel, which Wackenroder describes with majestic skill in his Oriental Tale of a Naked Saint, finds itself continually preventing time from standing still. The definitive proof that Len suffers from the most pathological type of boredom lies precisely in his fits of madness and in his extreme reactions. He despaired with himself. Then he threw himself on the ground, wrung his hands, everything within him was excited, yet inert, dead. Then he implored God to give him a sign, and he searched within himself. He fasted. He lay on the floor in a trance. Similarly, the character of Leonce in Leonce and Lena experiences a profound boredom against which he can do nothing. The extreme reaction that would have put an end to his pain, that is, his suicide attempt, is thwarted by the intercession of Valerius, who decides to save his life without hesitation. In fact, in the aforementioned Lustspiel, Leonce and Lena fall in love because they share the same suffering, the meaninglessness of their existence as a reflection of a deep boredom. Thus, so says Josefa Ros Velasco, what cannot be denied is that this boredom unites all those who suffer from it. And in fact, this is what one of the many consequences of a social environment that Büchner systematically criticizes in his works. Deep boredom as a symptom of an absolutist government that has lost even the reins of its own elite constitutes one of the favorite criticisms that the young Büchner launches at Restoration Germany, plunged into the goal of becoming a state of automatons, or as Novalis would say, a state that, like no other, has been administered as if it were a factory, referring to the newly born but increasingly powerful Prussia. Both Büchner and the Romantics see in the incipient revelation of modern society a threat to be reacted to. A significant number of writers often criticized the expected regularity that had ensued after the French Revolution. The new delineation of cities often brought with it an excess of regularity and repetition that, prolonged over time, did nothing but imprint on the subjects the characteristic void of meaning that brings with it a chronified situational boredom and/or a profound boredom. The fact of having turned the extraordinary into the ordinary through the use and abuse of reason turned existence into a mere predictable recounting of events, as Leonce himself acknowledges in despair. Oh, I know myself. I know what I will think and dream in a quarter of an hour, what I will think in 8 days, what I will dream in a year. God, what have I done wrong that you let me recite my lesson so often, like a schoolboy? Even though Büchner puts the poetic resources of Romanticism at the service of a social critique whose ultimate aim is revolutionary change in the French manner, through the following words added by Leonce, he only acknowledges the same theoretical foundation already proclaimed by the Romantics. By means of "But Valerio, the ideals," or "I believe in dreams," Leonce vindicates the value of the ideal against the real. Leonce and Lena may finally discover themselves as the princes whose union their parents had already desired, but by running away and rebelling against the divine imposition of their monarchical responsibilities, they have granted to the idea and to art the superior status that corresponded them. In a way, we can see here a kind of encrypted insinuation regarding boredom that, in turn, has its correlate in the political realm. Although it is not possible to take action when suffering from deep boredom, since the individual accesses at most a foreground, which is the state of consciousness regarding the annoyance of the present situation, the individual can remain in the realm of ideas. And this field should not be underestimated, for in it takes shape poetic and philosophical truth, and ultimately the germ of all change on a large scale, however slow or difficult it may be. Despite being a prince and therefore perfectly integrated, at least superficially, in that new state whose principle is utility and pragmatism, Leonce is a prey to constant uneasiness and perceives idleness as a punishment, not as a pleasure. This is a fundamental trait that differentiates him from Valerius, who finds in boredom and idleness an absolute paradisiacal oasis. Valerius wishes to abolish work and does so. Leonce knows that idleness is none other than resigning as a human being. The role of boredom is thus twofold. Its illustration projected onto the characters not only serves as an impetus for the cathartic identification of the audience and ensuing move to action, but also wields moral arguments against political corruption and the consequent ad absurdum it brings with it. The symptom of boredom serves here as a warning of a widespread immorality that degrades the human race and must be confronted. And what is interesting about this lies precisely in the fact that there are two planes. A literary one, in which the deep boredom of the characters leads them towards an unbearable existential anguish, and a meta-literary one, in which this kind of boredom actually constitutes a lacerating critique of immorality and serves as a tool of awareness and change for the reader. However, it serves the reader, but not in a specific way and not in an obligatory way either. The reader will be able to do what he or she can according to the type of boredom he or she suffers from and his or her exogenous and or endogenous circumstances. Okay. If in Leonce and Lena boredom is a central motive and is explicitly represented, in Woyzeck it manifests itself in an attenuated form. We know that the captain suffers from chronic boredom because of his irrepressible melancholy and his constant references to time, which he wants everyone to fill in slowly. Slowly, Woyzeck, slowly, one thing after the other. He makes me all dizzy. What am I supposed to do with the 10 minutes he'll finish early today? Woyzeck, he still has his beautiful 300 years to live. 300 years! It takes 360 months and days, hours, minutes. What does he want to do with all that enormous time? It makes me afraid for the world when I think of eternity. Occupation, Woyzeck, occupation. In this quotation we witness, therefore, the captain's anguish about eternity. However, we do not know to what extent this is a chronic boredom dependent on the individual or the situation, since the character has little psychological depth. The fact that chronified situational boredom and deep boredom are the most significant from a literary point of view is by no means trivial. Both typologies share with Büchner's work the same source, namely a context or situation that remains unchanged over time. To write Leonce or Woyzeck, Georg Büchner relied on real facts and sources. Through a measured conjunction of poiesis and mimesis, he intended to cultivate in the world population the formation of a new spiritual life. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Julia, for your presentation. This is the reason I remark it that you are an undergraduate because you are the only one during the conference, and it was fantastic. So now you can raise your hand, or just I'm not sure if anybody was going to ask a question.
Thank you, Lamis. Thank you so much for the comment. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Liz, go ahead, please.
Julia, thank you very much. I think that was it was great job today. I just wondered if you would say a little more about the fact that these are aristocratic figures. You were talking about the relation to the revolution and the spiritual aspirations, and I wonder how you see that that dimension, particularly in Leonce and Lena.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Oh, thank you very much for your question. It is very interesting to look at this side of Büchner's work. Yes, I do think he did a lacerating critique of the aristocratic class, but of course also of the bourgeois class. So to what extent this boredom serves as a critique, that is maybe that could maybe be done in future. But of course, I think there's a connection between these two aspects. For example, there's a very interesting thing or fact, and the fact that the captain in Woyzeck suffers from a chronic boredom is very interesting since he represents the aristocratic military class, and I think he shares the same boredom as King Peter in Leonce and Lena, although I haven't talked about it because I haven't got enough time. But yes, I think there is a pretty connection, a huge connection between these two aspects. And yeah, but there's also another aspect. Leonce, of course, he's a prince, but he still has some poetic sensibility, and boredom acts as a marker, in his case, of a situation which goes wrong, I mean, of absolutism in Germany. So this hope that the aristocratic ones can also have some kind of sensibility is also there, and I think this aspect should not be underestimated. But yeah, but of course I'm not an expert. I'm just beginning to. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Julia and Liz. I'm checking the chat. So Annie says, so interesting, and it links so well with Mario's presentation yesterday about the work of Julian Grach and the boredom of the decaying empire. Yeah. Julia was not able to be here yesterday because you are with your tests at the university, I think. But yes, absolutely. Any other questions, commentaries, suggestions? I just wanted to remember that, but just concerning my maybe concerning my own theoretical framework, that Blumenberg, the German philosopher Hans Blumenberg, I think is worth praising, reminding this. He was the first one in establishing the idea that boredom is functional. There is boredom meets some kind of functioning in our lives, even in an adaptive way, in an evolutionary way. But unfortunately, he only wrote about this idea in German, and their texts were kept unpublished after his death. So I tried to translate them into Spanish, but not into English yet. So sometimes people forget or directly don't know that Blumenberg was the author who introduced this idea. But anyways, he said that all kinds of boredom are not saying healthy, but functional. After all, even if some kind of boredom leads to unhealthy or maladaptive behaviors, even if they materialize in suicide, because at least this kind of boredom is keeping us in movement, after all. So I was remembering the conversation I had with James after the conference yesterday, in which I was introducing my own research, in which, as you know, as many of you know, I'm studying how boredom in nursing homes, how some kind of chronified, situational chronified boredom in nursing homes become deep boredom, after all, because older adults in nursing homes, at the very beginning, they realize they are aware about how they would want to fill their time in a meaningful way. But after a long period of time in which the context, which is the I'm sorry. Excuse me. The whole context, which is the institution, the nursing home itself, uh, which prevents them from materializing their ideas to fill time, to fulfill time. After a long period of time suffering from chronic situational boredom, they start experiencing deep boredom, profound boredom, this kind of boredom in which you are even not able to recognize in which way you would like to fill your time. So it's an irreversible step, I think, but not for Blumenberg, for example, because even if the characters of this presentation or any other romantic novel, or even if older adults in the nursing homes in which I'm working on react just screaming, just crying, just through violence. Anyways, this is functional also for Blumenberg, but I totally disagree. I totally disagree. I think that if boredom, if the reaction to chronified boredom or deep boredom, after all, materializes in something unhealthy, maladaptive, or dysfunctional, this is not functional after all. I don't know. What do you think about this? Are you more with me or with Blumenberg?
Thank you so much for your question. It's very interesting, but also pretty difficult to answer because I had the same question when writing my paper and when researching. Since on the one hand, we have Leonce. He suffers from deep boredom, and it leads him to an awareness. He discovers the importance of poetry and art when facing this emptiness derived from the inversion from in the relationship between man and God. But on the other hand, we have the case of Lenz, and Lenz. In his case, it's not that easy because he actually suffers so much, and uh, during a very long period of time from this boredom, he has violence attacks. He reacts in an extreme way every day. He just can't socialize, and of course, I think that is a very negative aspect. And in that case, boredom's functionality would not be sufficient or would not be verified. So yes, I think I agree with you because there are so much cases, but of course there are a lot of cases in which deep boredom, derives in really extreme situations in which the subject suffers a lot, and
Thank you, Julia. Thank you so very much.